Hello, my name is Fraser Simons. This is my channel, Springboard Thought. Today I'm doing the Canterbury Tales tag created by A.J. Dunn Reads and Writes. They're a fantastic, I guess you could say, creator, influencer, what are we out here? A parasocial person of which to project your wishes. I've been following them for a while. Fantastic channel, lots of thrillers, slashers, horror, but fairly eclectic, so I wouldn't put them in a box like that either. And fantastic experience on the Discord with the Killer Reads book club, especially with talented Mr. Ripley. If you're interested in that kind of thing, definitely check it out. I'll have a link below, and if I forget to have a link below, you should poke me so that I put the link below. I'm going to do all of the prompts, but I'm going to split this video over two, I think, because it would be long otherwise. But I like all of the prompts and want to do them. So a good compromise, hopefully, will be a split. And it says right here, all the people that say there's too many prompts, the last line, feel free to do as many or as few of the prompts as you want. So you have created your own demise if you create a long video, I think. So the first prompt, the host is the character who relays the tales to the reader. He is large, loud, and merry. Recommend a mammoth book over 800 pages for March of the Mammoths. Well, you've got a couple days to crush this. The first book that, another thing that I forgot to mention, I put a constraint on myself for this video in only talking about books that I've never recommended with a tag before, or ever, I think, talked about on BookTube at all. So we'll see. I've done my best to keep to that, but it has been a lot of books and a lot of tags, so, you know, I'm doing my best there. So first book is Prioress of the Orange Tree, a fantastic 5-star fantasy read that is very different. It is very concerned with world building and such, does contrive to do the info dump thing, but the world is so interesting that I think you won't mind. Prose also very lyrical, there's a musicality to it, lots of specificity. It is kind of about averting the end of the world in a roundabout way. And everything about this book, I would say, is fairly unconventional, which is why fantasy fans typically didn't go for it, but why I loved it. It has LGBTQ representation and inclusion, which ranges from their whole identity is kind of expressed to casual inclusion, which we love to see. And it has East versus West, very ambitious themes that come together in the book, which have a excellent resolution. Conflicts are generally dealt with in ways that you don't see coming. Characters are very vivid and well imagined. It is a chunkster. The audiobook will help you. It is very well narrated. So you're not getting your genre tropes, you're getting something else. Go for this. The knight stands for fighting, war, and bravery. Recommend a book with a courageous main character. So this might be a little controversial, but it relates to my own personal experience. I love The Magicians by Lev Grossman, which is kind of quintessential for a white guy like me. But the mental health issues in here is just something that really resonated with me. The whole trilogy, in fact, is about Quentin dealing with his mental health, his growing up, you could say each of the books is a coming of age story, but the larger arc is across all three of them. Some people absolutely can't stand Quentin, and I understand that. He has self-harm issues, he doesn't treat his friends very well, he doesn't have really the spoons or the tact or the wherewithal and lots of privilege to not deal with friends in a very meaningful way, and he's continually called out for that. Similarly, by contrast, I really liked Julia's story, but some people did not. It involves rape in it, and how it's dealt with, I thought, made sense for the story and was impactful to me, but I'm also not a woman, and lots of women tend to disagree with me about that particular arc, so I would listen to them about that. However, if you can stomach that trope and see what the author's intent is and go with the flow, I guess, of what the story is actually trying to do, it is completely, again, unconventional for fantasy. The first half is a coming-of-age story. The second half is a complete dissection and critical response to fantasy tropes, primarily Narnia and stuff like that. So classic fantasy stuff. It interrogates the chosen one trope and puts mental health stuff front and center. All of these people are fairly well characterized, I thought. I really loved each and every member of the cast, and they all struggle to be good people. It's set in college times. People bill this as Harry Potter, but in high school it is so not that. Out of everything that I have talked about, if you think Harry Potter in college from all that stuff, I don't know what Harry Potter you were reading, maybe only the last 2 books, but this book is much more for real than that, and I absolutely love the trilogy. The Wife of Bath stands for marriage, sex, and arguing. Tell us about a book with a strong female character. This book was fantastic, I thought. Inland. This is an unconventional Western. I guess it didn't start the trend, but it kind of came out when the trend was trending, I guess you could say, about female or non-binary characters, unconventional people in Westerns that get to be the protagonist and going through their own way. It's sort of like you could say historical retelling, except it's fiction and not nonfiction, and it's a retelling in the sense that these people have always existed. They existed in the West, situating them into classical Westerns, navigating similar situations in better ways, knowing what Western tropes are in the genre and having like a critical response to that. And I thought this book handled it very well. Got some fantastic prose. Even if it is lagging in pace sometimes, I really didn't mind spending any time at all with the voice in this. The Pardoner is all about ambiguity. Tell us about your favorite queer characters. Okay, so this book doesn't get talked about nearly enough, especially in cyberpunk circles, probably because it's young adult biopunk. It is what I would call second wave or third wave cyberpunk. It is situated firmly in young adult territory, but it is also fairly dark. It is confronting a lot of things ingrained in society in very interesting ways. Essentially, this is a futuristic world, of course, where the Third World War, I believe, happened, and in response to this, in Brazil, a mega pyramid, I can't remember what it's actually called, but it's basically a pyramid, has sequestered itself and created its own matriarchal society, not allowing men to have the same power that they had, which led to, the end of the world type deal. They also simultaneously have done this for 3 or 4 generations, so they don't know what the outside world is actually like. They're operating in sort of like a consistent panic mode over end of civilization and trying to keep things going. So there's like an ingrained conservatism in the culture, even though it is matriarchal and progressive in many ways. And so it makes for a very interesting story. But on top of that, the actual Summer Prince, from which this is takes the title, every season, I believe, they cede power to one man, and they have like a kind of competition in which to choose the male that gets this, and they have like princely powers for a while, and can make governmental decisions and choices. However, at the end of the season, they have to cede that power back to the government in the way of their actual ceremonial death. They are ritualistically killed at the end of it. And this is the story about a girl who essentially forms a very close relationship with the Summer Prince over the summer, and kind of them hatching a plan in order to make this more than just a symbolic event. And it's also heavily steeped in queer themes, queer characters, very standout and different for cyberpunk, yet never gets highlighted. The Miller is bold, blasphemous, and overturns conventions. Who is your favorite naughty character? So, you're gonna have to cover your ears for some of this because I'm gonna read the opening of this. This is another cyberpunk book with a queer bi character, in this case, woman, who is a mercenary in a corporatocracy. So it's kind of feels like it's based off of Shadowrun a little bit, except there's no like orcs and stuff like that, but society is kind of arranged like that. She is forced to essentially be a mercenary or be a poor person. They have neurochips in their brain. Everybody is tracked. There's no privacy. And in the first book, this is the second, she wakes up with, I believe, her neurochip gone, and her girlfriend is missing, and it's kind of like an action thriller where she's trying to get her back. In this one, she's just angry about the outcome of the first one and doing her own thing. It's hard to talk about it without giving away particulars, but I think that's all you really need to know about her. She's angry, fierce, a badass. She makes some very like poor decisions for which she is culpable, so there's noir stuff going on as well where she's trying to figure out a mystery. She gets her ass beat all the time, unapologetically angry, unapologetically queer, and there is some sexual content. So this has one of the most memorable, seared in my brain, opening paragraphs that I will ever talk about, but I will warn you because it is got swears, it involves puritanical stuff and sex, and I think will set the tone very much for you as to if you will want to pick up this book or not. You haven't lived until you fisted a nun under the cheap light of the neon Jesus, with the material of her full coverage habit shoved to her waist, black plastered to the gritty wall, and vivid color streaking her sweaty, flushed face. Goddamn, it's an experience. Her filthy lips wrapped around words I think are forbidden in the usual Catholic vernacular. So, it is definitely raunchy, sexual, and most of the time I would say it's geared towards violence. The Prioress is modest, quiet, and compassionate. Recommend a book you don't hear much about on BookTube. This was a challenge for me because I parrot stuff quite often, but I have another unconventional fantasy book for you. The Red Threads of Fortune. It's also paired with a duology, The Black Clouds of something. I can't remember. I'll put it up though. And you can read them in any order. It's from the two different perspectives. I believe they're twins, I think. It's been a few years since I read this, but it was fantastic. So essentially this is obviously a Singaporean inspired fantasy from which the author comes from. They're non-binary, and the characters are similarly non-binary. They go through a process as monks who are kind of learning to use the magic system in this, which is very unique, but I can't recall enough to articulate it intelligently. It is an empire that is continually exploitative of their labor, and they belong to a caste that is elevated, yet expect very much from them because they're one of the few people that can wield this kind of magic and are successors to the throne, and so have heavy burdens on them. They are taken to the monastery, and the thing that's very interesting, they're taken at a very young age, separated from their family. And the thing that's very interesting about this society, at the point of which they reach maturity, which I think is 16, 17, 18, something like that, they actually choose their gender, whatever pronouns they would like, and they imbibe something that makes their body reflect that. So there's a lot of questions that come with that aren't super interrogated, but it was a very interesting concept. There's 4 or 5 novellas in the series and a novel coming for this, I believe. and it's fantastic. It's focused on conservative values versus progressiveness, and a lot of themes around revolution that I think tie into actual historical events, but I'm not completely certain. This is a book that I would actually love to reread because it's been, whenever it actually came out, I think 2017 or 16, I got it right away. Absolutely loved it. The monk cares little for the rule of work and prayer. Tell us about an unconventional character. I think this is pretty unconventional. The Testament of Mary, Mary herself. This is the story of Christ's crucifixion, especially a little bit before that, but not by much, told by the mother. It is really surprising. It's the first Colm Tobin's book that I've ever consumed, and it was phenomenal, staggeringly good. And the audiobook is written by, read aloud by Meryl Streep, which was also incredible. This, just the observations, the thing that she chooses to relate to about her son, and the sort of ostensibleness of his like divinity, and how the followers treat him and how other people treat him, especially like during and after the crucifixion and stuff. I can't say enough good things about it. It's absolutely incredible in a short. Whether you're religious or not, which I am not, it was a very impactful read, so I think a lot of people would get something out of it. The Friar is all about confession. Confess to us. Have you read the Bible, Torah, Quran, or other religious texts all the way through? I have not. The Summoner is lecherous and a drunk who tries to sound more educated than he is. Tell us about a book that sounded better than it was. Mythical Wood. This is a phenomenal concept that is just completely executed in the wrong way, I would say. This is about a wood that essentially embodies the mythical properties of ancient Britain. So it's kind of like timey-wimey. People go into this wood, they kind of can end up in like Robin Hood era or Arthurian era, but it's all as if the wood remembers the mythological components of it, not that you would like actually emerge in like Arthurian land, at least in the first book. So it's kind of about a boy who becomes subservient to the father who is researching this mythical wood and goes missing, and kind of the legacy of that. He grows up in the shadow of his father. He hates the wood, never wants to go in, and then he completely does a 180 and only wants to research the wood when he comes home. He meets a woman, and it becomes very like conventional and stereotypical from there. She is ostensibly a product of the wood, and so beautiful, voluminous, voluptuous, blah, 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 blah. He loves her right away. He tries to get into her trust and to worm his way deeper into the wood. But it becomes more and more conventional. Rape as a trope is used to coerce him into doing something. Evil brother stuff happening. Lots of bullshit like that. The parson is poor but rich in thought and deeds. Tell us about a book that gave you more than you expected. This was a complete surprise to me. A friend of mine, 3, 4, 5 years ago, something like that, kind of noticed that I wasn't reading much YA, and I didn't really find anything I was super connecting with. And he said, "You obviously have read The Raven Boys, though, have you not?" And I hadn't even heard of it, which is kind of wild as to how big it is. But what to say about this book? So this book is phenomenal for a number of ways. For one, just inclusion, representation, the actual like giving voice to characters that are young without making them seem infantile is excellent work. And then giving them a mythological, I don't know, standard, I guess, to march to. It is sort of reminiscent of the Friends group of The Secret History, where the friends become so close and so well articulated that you kind of always want to pick up the book and read it again, just to kind of be in that headspace of the adolescent found family type stuff happening. And they are all sort of taking upon themselves to look for ancient ley lines in Britain, of course. So it's got like a tropiness to it, which gets turned on its head later on. There is a particular amount of tension that is created, I believe, very early on, probably in the first chapter, in which a character dreams of the death of the person who is looking for the primary ley line. As she meets these boys, some of the dreams that she has dreamt come to fruition, and so it constantly ratchets it up the tension as to whether or not the other things that she sees will come true. The strange thing is, kind of at least, she comes from a family of seers, like the town fortune tellers, you could say, like sisters, almost like the craft kind of, actually, like one's funny, one's pretty, that kind of stuff. But she has never had that kind of sight or power before or anything like that. And then we also get the coming of age aspects and the collision of putting this friend group into the mix with a girl who just has come into their peripheral and friend group kind of thing that messes stuff up. It can be quite beautiful in its descriptions. The characterization and how the plotting works is phenomenal. Yeah, it has very few faults, and the entire series is absolutely fantastic and something I'll revisit in the future. The Squire stands for youth, beauty, and courting. What book did you fall in love with when you were a youth? So I have to say the first book that really got me is Catcher in the Rye, which again is a quintessential thing for a white guy to be saying, I think, especially at my age. But this is the first book that kind of the Baldwin trope quote of, like, you think your pain and your sorrow is singular, and then you read. This was, yeah, like that for me. Basically, I grew up very angry when I was young. I didn't have too many friends. I didn't relate to people. I thought that my pain was a magical, singular thing that nobody else could possibly imagine or take. And it was just, yeah. Essentially, when I read this, it kind of like mentally checked me, where I felt simultaneously seen by Holden, and also like, if I continue to be this way, am I going to be like Holden? Essentially. So it was a very like pivotal book for me, and one that I'm absolutely terrified, despite owning, as you can see, to revisit in the future, because I'm not sure how that experience would relate to a reading now. And I think that I would absolutely loathe Holden rather than identify with him. So, the clerk says little, but his words are wise and morally virtuous. Tell us about a short book that made you a better person. So another high school check your privilege type book. Night. This is very tiny, actually. I was surprised when I got it, and this is the one that I got for high school. This is a Holocaust story. It was, again, I was a very like angry young man about not knowing my father, and like just every single slight seemed to be very keen back then. And then you read something like this and you realize you don't really have it so bad, especially me. So yeah, it just sort of opened my mind, did exactly what it was supposed to do for a high school reading list, essentially. The man of law upholds justice and knows the laws by heart. What is a book you could not imagine rereading? Return of the King, baby. This book, I thought it was fine. I gave it a 3. I gave Fellowship 5. I gave Two Towers 4. And I gave this book 3. Controversial, I know. Don't come for me. Don't at me. But, oh boy, this book just droned on and on for me. All of the tension as we know, everyone knows probably, is resolved very early on in this book, probably like halfway through it, and then it just keeps petering on. The ending has some very interesting things to say, especially with Frodo, that I agree with. The Industrial Revolution critique I could have done without. The Saruman coming back and being a bitch thing, whatever. I am of the Alfred Hitchcock persuasion where the narrative tension's out, goodbye. The municipal provides the food, so Quartermaster, I guess, recommends a series you think is good from the first book to the last. This is the last prompt of the day. Earthsea. So I think I am cheating with this one. I think I've mentioned this before in a tag video. However, I think I've mentioned every single series, like The Expanse, The Magicians, which I just did, and The Darkness That Comes Before, Gormenghast. So I don't know. This is the freshest I think I have, and it is excellent, especially in this format because Le Guin has beforewords and afterwards. She knows what they're for. She actually uses them properly. She doesn't spoil the stories or talks about the themes so much as says what the trials and tribulations of creating the story initially was, what she was going for. And then the afterword is kind of examining where it went, what happened, and some of the more other stuff, like, for instance, fighting for the characters in all of the covers published throughout the years to be people of color, or an examination of the specific scenes in certain books like The Tombs of Atuan, stuff like that. It is fantastic, incredible, and has all this extra artwork in it. Fantastic book. Sometimes you can get it very cheaply now, so I urge you to do so. And there's a ribbon, if you like ribbons. It's got one. And that's it. So the last thing is to tag people, which I will do at the end of the next video, I think. But I just wanted to thank AJ themselves for tagging me, as well as Teacup the Storyteller, which is a person of infectious enthusiasm, and you should check out immediately. And you can't but be delighted by her videos. Check AJ out for sure, and I will see you next week for the conclusion of this tag, which will probably be shorter than this video, but we'll see. Bye.